In a world where we all have a phone on us pretty much 24/7, procrastination is quite literally on tap. Well, maybe 2 or 3 taps and you're absorbed in dopamine-filling, self-esteem-killing consumption. As I finish breakfast and think about getting to work, it's like I'm filled with this kind of dread about getting started. And so to avoid having to do that, I procrastinate. Or at least I did, but a conversation I had with a good friend of mine who just so happens to be one of the most productive people I know radically changed my perspective about work to the point where I now actually rarely struggle, honestly, with getting started with work. And I really hope that this video is for you, or that conversation was for me. When I think back to just over 2 years ago when I first was starting out at law school, I was living at home, so had pretty much zero responsibility other than just studying. Like, that was my sole focus. Washing, cooking, cleaning, like all of this stuff, general life stuff, pretty much wasn't a thing that I had to deal with. And I think at that point, like, the idea that I could have been making a video every single week alongside a full-time job as a corporate lawyer while also living on my own and having to do all the stuff that goes along with that would have seemed completely insane, purely because at that point, yeah, okay, I was being pretty productive when I got to work, but I was wasting so much time on YouTube, on Netflix, on Instagram at the start of the day before I even got started with properly working. But I remember this conversation with my friend really vividly, and he's one of these people who just seems to manage to get so much done and never complains about everything that he has going on. And I asked him, like, how on earth do you do all this? And he kind of said to me basically that, well, first of all, work is very rarely as hard as we make out in our heads. Like, okay, sometimes it's dull, sometimes there are things that are difficult, but on the whole, like, studying or work actually really isn't that hard. Second, this is an amazing opportunity. Like, tons of people have fought for you to have the opportunity to learn and be able to have this access to information. And it's something that should be celebrated in our heads rather than thought of as a chore we have to do. And overall, work and hard work isn't something that we just need to do right now so we can move on to doing something else afterwards. It's something that in and of itself can give us satisfaction. And at that point, I realized I had a belief, which I didn't even realize was a belief because I took it as truth, that work is and has to be painful. The point is this: we've all learned stories about the drudging of work, and I bet you can name someone in your team at work or at uni who moans all the time about all the stuff they have to do, or have a flatmate, for example, who moans about exercise. The point is that these productive things are associated in our minds with pain and opposed to enjoyment and pleasure. We've been indoctrinated with this idea that effort equals pain. And our chimp brains that are supercharged by these narratives overestimate the pain that work will cause and underestimate the fulfillment it will give us. And that's why we procrastinate. Our inner chimp, high on the fake news that work is some form of torture to be avoided at all costs. But we can break from this narrative, and over the rest of this video, I want to share the 4 ideas that I guess I've kind of developed since that conversation, which allow me to see productive work as painlessly as possible so that I have no reason to procrastinate. So first up is to visualize the pleasure that you'll get once your work is done. And it's this idea that whatever you're doing, whether it's being on Instagram, on YouTube, on Netflix, none of those things will be as satisfying as that feeling of sitting down at the end of the day, guilt-free, knowing you can do whatever you want because your work for the day is done. At least for me, when I'm sat there procrastinating, I get this kind of sense of slight guilt, and so it's never actually fully pleasurable. Instead, block out time, be really strict with yourself on when you're going to finish your work, and then enjoy your breaks and the end of the day completely guilt-free. Next up is to start small. So if you have a big piece of work or an essay to write, for example, it can seem really overwhelming because there's so much that goes into that. Instead, in Trello, I like to break down into subtasks, reading an article, for example, the little things that need to go into accomplishing that bigger task. And then at the start of the day or the start of your session, when you're feeling like you really can't be bothered, just plan to do that small thing. You know, reading an article is so easy. And once you get into that, then you'll get up some momentum and suddenly doing that bigger task becomes so much more feasible. Another top tip on this, and it's an idea I stole from Ernest Hemingway, is whenever you're writing, leave whatever you're writing mid-sentence or kind of mid-paragraph. Don't finish the paragraph you're writing, go away and come back to it, because you're then having to start afresh. Instead, if you leave it mid-sentence, finishing that sentence is really easy and suddenly you're back into the flow of it. Third is to create artificial deadlines for yourself. And this is something often recommended so that you don't spend longer on things than you should. But I also think it's really powerful because it means you're always ahead of the game and you avoid lots of the stress and anxiety that comes from leaving things to the last minute, which I think is probably the greatest stress and pain that people really feel and associate with studying or working. Daniel Kahneman, in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, talks about the difference between decision utility and experienced utility. It's the idea that we don't make decisions based on our actual experiences of things, but based on the stories we tell ourselves about those experiences. So the next time we come to get to work, our memory is of stress-free fulfillment, not a panicked rush. Finally, make your work discursive. So for me, when I think about writing an essay or a formal presentation at work, that kind of fills me with dread and I don't really know where to start. Instead, if I see it as just like I'm reading some articles and I'm looking into stuff and I'm gonna critically analyze that, give my genuine thoughts on it and kind of have a chat with myself or with someone if I have someone to talk to about it, that seems way more approachable. So I'll start by just typing up some of these ideas as they come into my head. They might be complete rubbish, but I'm thinking like Ed Sheeran has this principle where he sees his ideas as like a pipe and there's loads of sludge and slime in the end of the pipe and you kind of just need to open it up and get stuff flowing out of you so that by the time you've cleared that out, there will be beautiful fresh flowing water or great ideas behind that, but just get started with writing something. So what are the key takeaways from this video? First up, stories of painful work cause procrastination. The pain you imagine work to cause is almost always greater than the pain work actually causes. Second, visualize finishing your work. When you're procrastinating, think how much more satisfying scrolling and watching will be when you don't feel guilty about not working. Third, start small. If you begin the day or work session with a light task like reading or replying to emails, you're less likely to be scared into procrastination. Fourth, create artificial deadlines. Procrastination is fueled by memories of stressfully working towards tight deadlines, so create artificial ones and stay ahead of the game. And finally, make your work discursive. I find the idea of just thinking or chatting with myself about a topic much less intimidating than formal writing, so start out where you feel most comfortable. And as you have more time because you're now procrastinating less, if you're interested in entrepreneurship, I really encourage you to check out Trends, my new favorite knowledge hub for all things business, entrepreneurship, and side hustle related. It's a members community from the hustle. The quality of the content that Trends are producing is absolutely insane, from in-depth articles that are really easy to digest, predicting the biggest businesses to come in 2021, to their podcast, which is only available through a Trends subscription, which has now become a regular feature of my morning routine. They also have weekly live lectures and videos of all of these on the platform. I really enjoyed one last week on company growth with the co-founder of Udemy. I'm super excited to get more involved in their exclusive communities and get feedback on ideas I have to expand my business on YouTube this year, including a possible sustainable clothing company. We'll see. It's an amazing place to meet other entrepreneurs and investors and to bounce ideas around with people who have genuine experience. Right now, you can get your first 7 days on Trends for just $1. Go to trends.co/Liam to get started for just $1. And if you enjoyed this video, go check out my video about toxic productivity to make you feel a whole lot better about having downtime.